Okay, so we will get started.
So thank you so much for the introduction, and I just want to start up by saying thank you to the Honorable Ellen Lord and Stacy Bostranik for, I thought it was a great panel. Your questions, I know there were more questions that we didn't get to, but it was really informative. I certainly learned some things, as I always do. I had a chance to work with both Ellen and Stacy in the building very closely, and I have continued to work with them now from an industry's perspective. So thank you both. And Stacy, I don't know where she went. It's hard to keep track of her, as you know, but thank you both for taking the time to be here this morning and to kick things off with us. I am going to actually, because I wouldn't do it justice, I'm going to have this amazing panel do some quick introductions of themselves, and I will tell you we are equally lucky to have each of them on the stage because the depth of knowledge and expertise is just absolutely incredible. I could spend days talking to each of you individually, so thank you for agreeing to do this. And I'm going to ask you each also to give a minute or so intro on your background so we can get to know you a little bit. And also, just because it's the holiday season and I like to keep things a little bit informal, if you could just give us something from 2023 that you're especially proud of or thankful for as you reflect on the year and we start to all wind down for the holidays. So I will start with Andy.
So hello everybody, Andy Sauer. I am the CISO of Sentinel Blue. A little bit of feedback there, but my main role is as a fractional CISO for multiple small businesses. So Sentinel Blue is not itself a defense contractor. We work with a lot of small contractors, and that's where I've spent my career, is with small business inside of defense contractors that were small. And now my role is largely to represent and advise several dozen small businesses with things like CMMC and NIST 800-171 DFARS generally. As far as what I'm proud of in 2023, Sentinel Blue tripled in size, which was difficult enough, but I also had our third baby, and within a month of the baby being born, we moved, and my wife still likes me. Oh, well, I think she does. We'll find out. That's been an awesome year.
Pretty amazing year, I would say. So congratulations on both of those meaningful milestones. Okay, let's move on to Miss Amy Williams. And I just have to say, I am subscribing to your holiday look. I love it. The pink in December I get so sick of red and bling, so I am subscribing to all of you, everything you have going on. So Amy, over to you.
Thank you, Carrie. Is my mic on? Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Amy Williamson, Vice President of CMMC for CoalFire Federal. We help companies also, like Andy's company. We work with more mid-sized to large companies for the most part, but we're also happy to help smaller companies. I've been in cybersecurity for a couple of decades. My jam is to have a team of young people that I can mentor and help learn things that I've learned over the years and to help them motivate and cajole companies into doing better in cybersecurity. The thing that I'm proudest of is I started with CoalFire Federal in March, and we built some really cool and interesting programs that I'm super proud of. And a weird little fact is that I actually got my undergraduate degree on a music scholarship. I got a degree in IT and business on a music scholarship, and I'm taking up guitar this year.
Oh, I learned to play guitar when I turned 40, so not too late, I will tell you. My son is way better than me and makes me feel completely inadequate, but that's awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Amy. And I will just say, quick PSA for CoalFire. Exeter, my company, we use CoalFire for our FedRAMP accreditation. I just really, that is not an easy thing for anyone who's gone through it, and I will just say it was an absolute pleasure to work with the professionals at CoalFire, and they're absolutely fantastic. So really grateful for our partnership. Amy?
I appreciate that. I have to say that my team is just we have the most fun. The meeting with them once a week is the thing I look forward to.
You have a great team, really great team. Okay, next, JR, over to you, sir.
Good morning. So I'm Gerald Williamson. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer at Leidos. Williamson. Got a good connection here. My pick going. But I've been here at Leidos for 5 years. Prior to that, 3 decades at Northrop Grumman, where I got to serve as CIO, CISO, Chief Engineer, CTO. So I got to do a lot of things in this community, but have been in the div for a very long time. So I've seen a lot of change happen here. I'm like a native Northern Virginian. I joke there's like 5 of us. It's a very transient community, as you know, but I lived, born, growed up in this area, and very proud to be a Virginian. I'd say that the one thing I'm grateful for, there's a lot of things I'm grateful for, but probably the thing that comes to mind is my family. You know, these jobs and all the change that's happening nowadays takes a lot of time to deal with, and my family's very supportive of me and helps enable me to contribute, you know, to our community. So very pleased and happy to have their support. And I'll be a first-time grandfather here in about 3.5 weeks or so.
Oh, congrats. That's awesome. Very good. Big year. Just hopefully before Christmas, it'll be very close. Just after Christmas? Okay. Oh, maybe a New Year baby. That would be exciting. Okay, and Pirooz, over to you.
Hi, Pirooz Javan. I am the Chief Technology Officer at Easy Dynamics. Easy Dynamics is a larger small business. We've been around for roughly 16 years. We focus on cybersecurity, and core focuses are on cloud security engineering, compliance, information sharing, and digital identity. This year, I was able to go into my new role as a Chief Technology Officer. A lot of people don't know this. I'm a kind of a serial entrepreneur. I started my first business at 19. It sucks running your own business since 19 because you're always in the grind. So I'm pretty thankful this year.
Did you start in a
that I had
garage?
the luxury to move into a CTO role where my passion resides. The last couple of years, I've been focusing a lot around compliance automation at scale. I'm happy to hear that came up earlier in the conversation. I'm excited to be on the panel with these fine people and looking forward to the conversation.
Great. All right. Thank you all for that. And just by way of quick introduction for myself, I'm Carrie Wibben. I, in my past life, was the principal deputy for counterintelligence and security at the Pentagon under OUSD INS. So I was the head of counterintelligence and security for all of DoD. And then I transitioned to help create and lead and stand up the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, DCSA, the newest defense agency, before leaving federal government in late 2019 to come to Exeter and lead the federal business. And we also have had an amazing year. I think that's what I'm most proud of. In 2023, as I look back, is our success in growing and exceeding our targets and continuing to hire some amazing folks. And I just want to pick up on one thing before we launch into the questions, the skill bridge. So the military service members transitioning out and hiring them into the cyber field or broader security or supply chain field. I've had great success with the skill bridge program. If you don't know about it, easy to sign up for it and become a member, but I end up hiring almost every skill bridger that we bring in, and they have 6 months in the program. You kind of, it's like free help essentially for 6 months in a trial period, and what I love about them is just, the younger generation today, they're coming in with just so much knowledge and world experience and education than I certainly had starting out, and so they're wickedly impressive, so smart, and they have the right they're just an immediate cultural fit, right? They have the clearances, they're passionate about what they do. So I would say, look at SkillBridge. You can kind of tailor for the MOSs and skill sets that are most relevant and interesting to you, and it's been a huge success for us. So with that, let's go ahead and get into our questions. I think I'm gonna try to bridge from kind of the cyber CMMC focus of the first session, and then we'll broaden a little bit in the second half of the session to get to, the topic, securing the defense industrial base, where cybersecurity is a critical element, but certainly not the only consideration when we think about the threat landscape and how our adversaries are exploiting the defense industrial base every day. So I'm going to kick off with a question around actually where I know Stacy, who I don't know where she went, but Stacy was a little limited in what she could share in terms of detail, but I know is a burning question, and we are all anxiously awaiting the new rule. So I'll just ask the panel, what insights can you share about the forthcoming revisions to CMMC? And then I think more importantly, can you speak to the why behind the rule, and make sure that we're sort of reminding all of ourselves that this isn't just a compliance thing. There's a very good reason that this rule is being promulgated and hopefully implemented very soon. So whoever wants to start.
I'll start with the why. That's a really important question. And we talk a lot about the what. We talk about 110 controls, 14 domains. There's a lot that's uncovered about that. And how do we, can you do it with an MSP? Do you need individuals and all of that? And we're jumping right into the weeds of the details of how you comply without really understanding why are there 14 domains? Why are there 110 controls? Why is this happening? And so I've started kind of a fun game. I've posted a few things on LinkedIn. I have the fun game with my team where we look at something that's happened in the news and then we analyze how many controls related to CMMC could have helped prevent that thing. And so unfortunately, you don't have to go back very far to find something relevant. Yesterday, there was an article in the Washington Post by my friend Shane Harris unpacking Jack Teixeira's misdeeds for the Massachusetts National Guard, and he's I don't know if you kept up with that, but he posted 350 classified documents on Discord among some friends that then got transferred around to counterintelligence in other countries, and so it's a really, really big deal. A lot of people have talked about, well, he didn't have a need to know all of that in order to do his job. He was a technician, so he shouldn't have had access to those classified documents. So that's one control, though. When you look at all the domains of CMMC, they're related to how cybersecurity isn't a thing. It's a bunch of things that reinforce each other, and you can't just do one thing and have good cybersecurity. So that one thing with Jack Teixeira, for example, access controls related to does he have a need to know? That's one thing. But also audit and accountability, also security for insider threat, recognizing insider threat. He was called out by his superiors a number of times and they just let him go. And then systems and communications, there's controls related to that. So that's the reason why we have 110 controls, 320 sub-controls, 14 domains, because you have to reinforce things to keep bad things from happening. And the reason it's such a big hurdle for companies is because they have been connecting everything for convenience sake without taking into consideration what the consequences of that are. So there's a big hurdle to get over in order to get to compliant. But I would challenge you to look at the news yourself and then maybe pull up the model and just look at the quick list of each of the controls and say, okay, for this thing, how many of these controls could have helped prevent that? And then you're more motivated to do all of them because you understand how they all work in tandem with each other. That's the why. Sorry.
Yeah, I love that, Amy. No, I love that. I love applying it to the real world. I mean, these things happen every day. So I think that's a great sort of framework. Yeah.
To the why too. And I think that, I think there may be a couple of thoughts. One is that the rule around 7012 has been out there for quite some time, as we know. And this doesn't really change that. I mean, notwithstanding the great question around version R2 versus R3 around 171, and there certainly are some adjustments we're going to have to deal with there. But the requirements are still the requirements.
Yeah.
I think the whole idea behind CMMC was to have a verification and validation step, because we've known through our audits and through performance that we're not really meeting the requirements,
Right.
As stated before. So first and foremost, CMMC is intended to be that certification that, yes, in fact, this organization is meeting those expectations and obligations under that standard. So like ISO 27001 and other certification programs, assessors come in, verify, validate that what you said you're doing, you're actually doing. And so I think that's key. When we started down this road, this is the second point, with CMMC, the intent was to actually use that N for maturity. And unfortunately, that's kind of gone by the wayside because I think the feedback that we received through industries, it was just too hard. It was too hard to really deal with the complication associated with maturity. So honestly, Stacey, we should just rename it. So instead of CMMC, it should really be CCC. Fair enough, but it's really the cybersecurity compliance certification now.
Yeah.
Because we really sort of taken all the maturity pieces away. We're not asking to what degree do you do this. We're saying, are you doing it or are you not doing it? So it's really a compliance thing at this point. But the benefit of which, back to the why, is we're now verifying and validating that what the expectation is, the sort of minimum level of performance, is in fact in place and operating, and therefore we can have confidence, maybe that's the that we're actually doing that. We're meeting
Yeah.
that minimum standard of due care.
Right.
Only
I love
thing
that.
I'd like to add there is the engineering principle that systems perfectly achieve the outcomes that they're designed to achieve may not be what you intended. And the current system with 7012 has achieved an outcome where we've created an incentive structure for inaction for a lot of organizations, and they've taken advantage of that. They've not acted on the requirements. They've, POAM'd things for 5 years. And I talk literally every week. I talk to a company that says, yeah, we're just gonna wait on this one a little bit longer. We're gonna find out, what's happening. We'll see, we heard there's a rule coming, but we'll probably wait till we can read that rule. And, I have to tell them, like, resources are already pretty scarce. You're a small business, you're already the least desirable, businesses to be serviced. You're gonna have a hard time, if you're waiting toward, like the real time where your primes are coming after you to get your house in order. But I really hope, insight in the new rules, some things I really hope to see will be reversing that incentive structure and really lighting a fire under businesses that have been dragging their feet so that they could start making meaningful progress now, so that 12 months from now, when this all really goes into place, that they're actually capable.
Yep, that's great. Pirooz?
So I think I want to answer the why with 2 stories.
Okay.
We do work for the public sector, and in the last 5 months, all of a sudden, because of the regs that are coming out beyond CMMC, SEC, FCC is actually putting out some regs, we're seeing influx of commercial accounts. And one of the accounts, I'm not going to attribute anybody, the why for me is a national importance. We're dealing with a small rural telco, and as we're having the conversation, first time they're actually having a cybersecurity focused conversation. We ask them, well, how are you doing vulnerability management? Well, we haven't been. So well, why not? They run Cisco routers for about 20,000 Americans in a rural part of America, and they say the maintenance programs from Cisco are too expensive. So one why, national security, there can't be no oversight. And the last is why it's important for you as a small business or an organization to have these controls in place. Just last week, our CIO came up to us and said, I did an audit log review and we had an employee exfiltrate about 12 proposals. And that would have been under our radar. Trade secrets are coming out. It was on the last day of his employment. He took the documents unbeknownst to us, and now we know about it, we can take action. Now these practices, as we're learning as a small business, we're iterating and maturing, but that's important. I would want to know that information. So these controls also protect you and do bring value to you as an organization.
Great, thank you. Those are great. Those are great perspectives. And again, I think it really has to always be anchored in the why behind these things. So we keep perspective. And so I'm going to transition. I just wanted to I like to keep things interactive. So by a show of hands, if you don't mind, I assume most folks in the room are cyber/security professionals. Yes? Almost, okay, majority. And how many of you would say you're from a small business, let's say below 10 million? Okay. And then mid-size, 10 to, 100? Okay. And then large? Okay, good mix. Okay. So knowing that the largest will always just have more resources to implement any compliance requirement that continues to come down, which I will say we're not going to see fewer of. This is clearly, to me, I think there are a lot of headwinds for cybersecurity, supply chain risk management writ large. Legislation will continue to be promulgated, and we're seeing regulations, executive orders, and now policies, and really the oversight agencies start to really implement in a way that forces compliance where there's been some reluctance, right? So if you could just, each of you, share really, really great diverse audience here, but I think for the smalls and mids who are just going to be more resource constrained, and JR, I don't want to steal your line, but use the line you use, because I really think it's a great way to think about it. Can you sort of help those smalls and mid-sized company representatives who are probably fearful of the role, sort of worried about their ability to comply, worried about the business impact it might have on their company, sort of any suggestions you would provide to them for where Ellen provided some great suggestions for how to get their voices out there, how to get help, but I know you all have a very different perspective on how smalls and mids can kind of get their arms around this, and maybe different forums that they could become part of that would be helpful.
Yeah, so I'm a doer by trade. That's my background, technical, and I always see things that lens of like practical, applying this stuff. For the smalls, the main advice I have is don't overthink this stuff. I don't know that I totally agree with Stacy saying that NIST 171 is easy on its face, but you also don't need to do what I see a lot of the assessor community doing, which I'm also a part of, which is explore these things down to the nth level, where just like they've extrapolated these extreme interpretations where you have, people saying your company employees need personal firewalls or corporate firewalls in their personal homes. Like, this stuff gets pretty extreme. You got to keep it reasonable. And thankfully, I can reference a quote from Stacy because I talked to her last week about this, where I asked, like, is DoD's stance that we're looking for good, reasonable approach to this stuff, or are we looking for this super in-depth, highly conservative interpretation of like super literal ways of handling the requirements? And Stacy, I think, agreed with me and was like, no, we want you guys to be reasonable. We want this to be collaborative. We want you to get secure in a reasonable way. So smalls, don't overthink it. You don't have to rip and replace your entire network. Be thoughtful. And unfortunately, the counter to the good news there is the bad news is you're going to need expert help on this. Cybersecurity is an expert field. This is not a general practice. Now, if you're a small business owner or you guys work with the small business leadership, they need to be coached and brought up to speed on cybersecurity the same way they do with finance, with legal, with HR matters. It's in their purview. But you're going to need expert support, whether it's something you're going to do in-house or you need to find a provider that has the credentials to do this stuff. I think that's really the only way to achieve it at that scale.
Okay, great. Anyone else?
Yeah, everything that Andy said, plus don't forget to ask, if you're a small company, don't forget to ask up the food chain, because the prime contractors, from the conversations that I've had with them, do have resources they do care about. They can't do their work without you, so ask questions, ask for help, ask for clarification. If something is flowed down to you and you don't understand it, just don't take it, try to figure it out on your own, ask questions upward. The other thing that's really important to understand is that the smallest companies really are the biggest targets because they're expected to have the least resources. And so it's some very simple examples. Again, in the media, look for stories in the news. So there's, not too long ago, a small engineering firm that somebody reused their credentials on an educational site. They had their company password, and that was captured, their company email address and their company password. And so somebody was able to log in using internet version of the email, and then think about what they have access to. They have access to all the contacts up and down the supply chain. They have access to all the conversations that are taking place. It was really easy to just pretend to be that person because you're in their email, using their email, no spoofing required. That breach got very close to actually hurting a prime contractor. It was stopped one level down, but it was really just 2 hops from the smallest engineering company in the food chain all the way up to 1 step below the largest prime contractor. So you really are the biggest target. You really should care about this because it's your financial viability and your livelihood that's at stake as well. But people above you in the food chain care about your success as well because they can't do it without you. So ask questions.
So, I think organizations that have the skill set internally are first look internally to see how they can satisfy. And whether you do it internally or externally, one recommendation is identify your champion that's willing, able, and ready. It doesn't need to be a new CISO role. Do we expect every small business, 10, 15 people to stand up a risk management program within there? They kind of have to a certain degree now. I mean, and that's not an option, but identify your internal champion. They're capable of learning some of the cybersecurity concepts. Without it, I do think it's a long and expensive journey. And the second is, and this is one that I'd love, I hope at some point we touch up on this, is are we storing CUI? Like, is this something that's applied to us? Can we look across the, because we use Teams for a lot of projects and we do collaborate a lot, but would I classify and being able to go and understand the CUI data classification and making sure you're aligning that well with the ability to explain it to a prime contractor or to a customer, I think is something that I would also focus on.
Yeah, that's
I'll
great.
pick up on that. I mean, I think that's a really great point, and I think it begs the question, do you want to? Because, I mean, the whole program is around safeguarding controlled and classified information. That's what the whole program is about. And so if you don't have it, you don't need to meet these standards, so do you care? Now, there's a lot of great standards in there. I mean, 171 is a subset of 853, which is great best practices for cyber. So there's lots of great stuff to do in there just to keep your business safe, whether you have CUI or not. But to meet the minimum standard here around 171, you should have CUI. And if you don't, then you don't necessarily have to meet all of those requirements. You can go back to that sort of risk management model and decide what is appropriate for your business. And I think that's really key, because when we back up, 25 years ago, the primes held all of the sensitive data, and we would invite the innovative smalls to come in, and they would live in our environments. They would operate on our computers and our infrastructure. Why? So we could protect all this stuff in terms of what our customer expected us to do. And then this thing like the internet and cloud and everything just got away from us, and it got distributed. And folks like to develop on their own systems, not the system that I'm giving you. Why? Because I'm controlling it, and you don't want those controls. You want this flexibility to roll it your own way. You want to use your own tools to do those kind of things. That's great, but that comes at a price, which now means you have to safeguard this to the same level that we were safeguarding it, as a large prime. And so if you don't need it, you don't have to have it. Don't have it, because it comes with the burden of safeguarding it. And look, if you are going to have it, because that makes the most sense for you to store, process, or transit CUI, that's what puts you into the realm of this compliance regime, then you need to be able to invest. You need to be able to invest to safeguard it. And that's where that cybersecurity line of poverty comes into play.
Yep.
Because if you're not able to have a company of a size that makes, say, $100 million of revenue every year, if IT spend on average is 2%, of your revenue, it's $2 million here. And then cyber is not all of that. You have other IT things you're spending on. So even if cyber is 30%, of that, now what are you spending? $600,000 on cyber to protect CUI. That is a poverty line. And I can tell you, $600,000 is not going to cut it in order to safeguard this and to defend against certainly nation-state adversaries who are coming for that exotic information that will help those nations sort of garner their way into, say, a defense system, like Stacy talked about before. So you got to keep that in mind. That needs to be part of your economic optics here, is to think about where are you in the spectrum. At your point, you don't need to store, process, or transit CUI. Don't.
I'd also add, and this is because it's hitting us next month, we're coming up for our ISO 27001 audit, which was kind of like the de facto cybersecurity accreditation process that we went through. And the question I asked was, why do we need to do this? If we're going to go through CMMC next year, do we need to go through ISO 27001? So one recommendation to small businesses is, as you're seeing acquisitions, especially right now as we're in a transitory period, provide the feedback to offer some kind of reciprocity to CMMC, so that you're not, as a small business, having to deal with the cost of multiple frameworks, whether it's Rev 2 or Rev 3 or ISO 27001, SOC 2 versus CMMC. It's a higher bar in that I think some of the acquisitions out there will still put emphasis on the older. If we remove ISO 27001, we lose 750 points from our CIO SP4. I know this is a div conversation, but it does have an impact.
Yeah, oh, do we want to take, yes, go ahead, Amy.
One
Yeah.
thing quickly, when you were talking about an advocate that I think is also really important is that we've noticed that the advocate, there's a growing trend towards not just having IT or cybersecurity, but governance, risk, and compliance that's related to all of these different things. And who is hired into that position across organizations varies greatly. Sometimes they're legal professionals, sometimes they're project managers, sometimes they're IT people. But in order to manage something like CMMC, they really have to have some understanding of the infrastructure and how data flows in the organization. And so one thing that you can do for your advocate in your organization, whether they're in GRC or IT, or if you do have CUI and you are struggling with that, is you can put them through the CCP program, the cybersecurity, CMMC cybersecurity professional program, to get them up to speed on everything that they need to do. Anybody can take that course, and it's, a 1-week course, and then you pass it, and then you're a professional in that.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be a consultant to take that.
That's great, and I see a couple hands popping up. We're going to do questions at the end. I will definitely leave time for questions, so please, sir, remember your question if you can.
Can I add one
That's always
final
hard
note
for me to remember my question if I don't
to
say it.
this topic? Just
Yeah.
the hot topic in our industry right now is, of course, 171 CMMC, which, as we've just discussed, follows that data set, right? And if your strategy can be to remove that data and scope it out, that's great. And if your prime says come into our system to access this data, that's another strategy. The adversaries aren't just interested in data, they're also interested in disruption. So even though you can scope this stuff out, you remain a target. And increasingly so, as there is this global temperature warming, there's interest in disrupting American supply chain resilience, our surge capacity. So you are in the supply chain, whether or not you're handling the CUI, you still need to take action on this stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe you don't have to specifically do 171, you have to do something.
Yeah, and I think challenging yourselves to ask that hard question, right? That's what I love from this discussion is, do I need to be able to store, transmit, disseminate CUI? Is that something that is critical to me as a business? And just, I think everyone knows this, but it sort of hit home for me as I was the head of security and counterintelligence for DoD. I owned information security as one of the disciplines. CUI is an information security policy. And so only the government can mark something as controlled unclassified information. So hopefully everyone knows that, but you do not, as industry, I know there's some government folks in the room too, government is the only organization that can actually mark and classify something as controlled unclassified information. Now, the government's not very good at that, right? We all know that. It has been a long road implementing CUI as a standardized marking below classified. We don't have time to go into that, but I just wanted to make sure everyone knows. Now, if you have a question that, or a concern that maybe in aggregate, the amount of information or insight that you now have within your systems reaches a threshold that it should be protected at a higher level, go back to your government organization that you're supporting and raise that and ask that question. That's the responsible thing to do. But I think that's an excellent point to just sort of challenge yourselves and say, hey, are we being asked by our government clients to receive, store, process, disseminate CUI? If not, and if it's sort of not a critical part of your business to be able to do that, life just got a lot easier for you in this category. So I'm going to transition. I feel like we could literally talk for days on this topic or any one of these topics. I also love the point about like getting your champions and translating for them, why they need to care about this, right? So if you do have CUI and that is part of just doing business, helping your leadership understand what that means, why that matters, and really getting precise about defining what I call your assets, right? Your assets within your systems, what things matter most. Classification is one way to determine that if it's marked CUI. There are a lot of things that might be sensitive to you as a business, intellectual property, trade secrets, other things that you just need to make sure are protected at a higher level. And translate to your leadership and say, look, here's what would happen if this was compromised, right? And this just happened, 3 times in the last month with other companies. Let's not be that next poster child. So I think that's another critical point. Okay, I'm going to attempt to broaden the aperture a bit from cybersecurity, which is, of course, it is a soda straw when we talk about defense industrial base security and resilience and securing the DIB, but it's probably the biggest soda straw. And the one that frankly has just, had the benefit of being around for a long time as a discipline and has matured, I think, on the regulatory and policy side beyond some of the other categories of risk. But I'll just ask the panel, as you think about cybersecurity as one risk factor that, is critical to sort of playing effective defense within the defense industrial base, right? Having a strong, hardened cybersecurity posture. What are some other risk areas or factors, categories that you think are also critical to consider from a broader DIB resilience and hardening perspective?
I'll go first, I guess. So it's not cyber, but it's not specifically CMMC. So, as we think about mobilizing out to protect 300,000 defense industrial base, scaling out this problem creates a real strategic challenge. One that requires, as we touched on a couple times, manpower, skill sets. And if you look at the FedRAMP program as an accreditation body that's the high bar of cybersecurity, they've been around for 10 years and done just under 400 authorizations. So scaling this problem to CMMC is a real problem. And I think strategically, the White House has put out regulatory harmonization as a top priority. There's no implementation for it because it's so difficult to do. And there's emerging standards that are coming out in NIST that's teamed up with FedRAMP to really scale this problem out. It's called the Open Security Controls Assessment Language. And there's some foundational principles in terms of getting this much information collected, authorized, and getting more efficiency from that process. So I do think there's a strategic risk to scaling this out without making compliance automation as a first-tier conversation, a first-tier conversation.
I would just add that, it's really fair point. I would add that at the end of the day, it's not the cyber thing that's the thing. It's some product or service or capability that we're building and delivering to the customer. And when you align that into a mission outcome, that's really what we're trying to assure. When you're there having to use that capability, whether it's a weapons system or it's a support system to see sciences, whatever that purpose is. I mean, it could be a beam bullet or a Band-Aid, that we're deploying for that mission outcome. You want it to work. You need it to work. So ultimately, this is a quality thing. And the concern is that we can erode that quality because we're not dealing with the cyber things. Just like if we're not dealing with the quality in the widget that we create and develop, and so it only works 40% of the time, that's a quality problem. And so at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to solve. So the compliance here is just ensuring all the way through the life cycle of, cradle to grave of this thing that I'm preparing and developing and then giving to my customer for them to be able to use effectively in the mission. That's what we care about.
About FedRAMP, we might see something in this upcoming memo maybe about how we've, only got 400 authorizations in the relatively long time that FedRAMP's been around, maybe? She can't confirm nor deny. That's fair.
So the OMB memo does have some teeth in it around automation and machine reading.
I don't know. So that's a common criticism of FedRAMP is trying to scale this thing. Do you want to come back up here?
But too much on that, it's going to define what, thank you. It's going to define how we recognize FedRAMP monitoring, right? So because you aren't going to have an official FedRAMP certification, what do we see as the equivalency for that? Okay, so some of what you're speaking of is covered, but I'm not sure I would say all.
Right. May simplify it a bit.
It'll definitely give us direction.
Yeah.
And I'll let them know what they have to do to give opportunity to say. And I know that there are a lot of new companies out there that haven't been able to garner that federal contract to get FedRAMP certified that want to play, and we're excited to have those space.
Yeah, so I think that sort of helps with scaling. Doesn't help scale ATOs, but may create less necessity for ATOs.
I'm going to take a slightly different take on this and go very global with risk If you look at what's happening in businesses, particularly small, medium-sized businesses, if you're starting to get a little success, venture capital comes in and they want to invest in you, and then they want to, drive down costs and increase margins and keep everything as efficient as possible. And then you start to try to figure out where you can slim things down. And cybersecurity and IT is still considered a cost center, so let's slim that down to nothing. And so that becomes, kind of a snowball effect that keeps cybersecurity from becoming viewed as a strategic initiative where we really need to invest effectively and think of it as a strategic component. But I will tell you, for every single company that I've worked with, and there have been a number of them that have had breaches, nothing opens up the wallet faster than having a breach, because that's super, super expensive. If you have a ransomware attack and your data is ransomed for a very long time or not given back, that's extraordinarily expensive. And so then all of a sudden, the budget for cybersecurity increases too. And whatever needs to happen in order for all companies to view cybersecurity as a part of their strategic initiative and invest effectively so that it's appropriately scaled to the financial risk of your company, that's what we need to be doing.
Yeah, and I think in terms of broadening the conversation, you're absolutely right. You are cybersecurity professionals, many of you, or security professionals, but the mandates coming down, that apparatus, everything's being broadened right now to be more focused on holistic supply chain risk, right? And so I think that's what we're seeing within Ellen's former organization. The Office of Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment is putting out policy guidance now. Last fall, ASD Lohman, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment, put out policy guidance around a supply chain risk management taxonomy. So let's just start to all speak the same language. What do we mean by supply chain risk management? Cybersecurity is in there. Okay, that's a part of it. But you sort of need, I think it's really critical that you understand how cyber fits into now this broadened definition of supply chain risk. And then the other document I would point you to, and this is publicly available, is the SCRIM framework that was put out by ASD Lohman and his team in the spring timeframe. There are also FARs and DFARS clauses that are starting to come out. So pay attention to those, because again, this is just really it's all just kind of widening the trail that cyber has blazed for us appropriately, because our adversaries are not only exploiting cybersecurity as a threat vector, right? It's one of the most common, one of the most effective, one of the least resource intensive for them to exploit, right? Is how do we steal the intellectual property we need to gain a competitive advantage over the United States and our adversaries, that being our allied partners. But that's just one way. I can tell you, as the head of counterintelligence, I saw how our adversaries, every day I was running to every counter-espionage investigation the FBI had open on DoD, most of that involving IP theft within the defense industrial base. Our adversaries employ multiple threat vectors simultaneously to get at a single source of IP that might be within one of your systems, right, to gain that competitive advantage over us, to leapfrog ahead of us. And if you don't know that you have that IP, you don't even understand that that's what you need to be protecting above everything else, then you will be victimized, right? You will be exploited, and we will lose as a nation. So cyber is a critical element, but it is much more than that. The way we think about it, there's operational risk, right? Threat vectors, vulnerabilities our adversaries exploit, operational risk, financial health risk, right? When they see that you are struggling financially as a business, that makes you a target. That point was made earlier. Foci risk, right? The point about accepting investment from foreign funded entities, VCs or PEs, that you may not even know there's an investment from an adversarial fund behind that private equity, right? All you know is you're really excited to be getting capital that you need to continue to grow your business. You have a responsibility to know where that money is coming from. And then reputational, criminal, regulatory risk. ESG, right? Is your company receiving goods from the Uyghur region in China? Environmental, social governance, forced labor, right? Are you violating the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act? And then product risk, we've talked a little bit about hardware, software, are there vulnerabilities within your specific products that you're selling into the federal government? So those are sort of some of the categories and the way we think and what we're seeing, the policy guidance come out. And I will say, I have a bootleg copy, it's not secret, anybody can get it, I think, if you have the right connections, of the National Defense Authorization Act. That's in draft right now. The amount of requirements for cyber supply chain risk management, CSCRIM, which if you don't know what that is, we can have a whole conversation on that, or supply chain risk management more broadly, there is real teeth in the law, in the NDAA this year. That's not suggesting, it is mandating that these requirements be broadened and effectively implemented in the defense industrial base. So this is coming. So you really need to understand as cyber professionals, where you fit and then how to connect it to the broader conversation that's happening and that will continue to happen, because the headwinds are real and they're not going to stop.
Can I spin off?
Yeah, absolutely.
This point's a little bit real quick. So Pirooz made a sort of funny comment, which was like, small businesses, are they really going to have to spin up a risk management program? And then, yeah, they kind of are. And if you read Rev 3 of 171, guess what else you're standing up now? A supply chain risk management program. And where are the small business people at again?
Yeah.
How many of you guys struggled to get multi-factor authentication approved, let alone a risk management program built out, a vulnerability management program, a supply chain risk management program? I mean, this is going to be pretty difficult. And to one of the points Carrie made earlier, this is not getting any easier. If you have not read Rev 3 of 171, it is not easier in any sense of the word. And there are a couple key requirements that they're spinning up that completely flip on what we're currently getting away with, you might say. Like software control right now, you can block list, you can allow list. All the practitioners in here probably know, like, block listing, so easy. Allow listing might be the hardest thing to do in cybersecurity. Rev 3, they've taken away the block list option. So they are ramping up the intensity of just what you're supposed to do technically, which again, already very difficult in a small environment. Now, all this supporting infrastructure of risk management programs, security control assessments, supply chain risk management, adding one of your key assets in small business, MSPs, external providers, now adding provisions that they're going to need to carry CMMC certs or potentially get FedRAMP moderate, which hopefully a new rule doesn't say that, but it may.
Why do you want to have CUI? Yeah.
Yeah.
Competitive.
Yeah.
I'd say that when
Yeah.
contracts are going to come out, we want to be able to bid on them.
Yeah.
We don't want to miss out. It's almost like, did you get that SIN from GSA? You don't
But I
miss
think,
it until
I
it
think
comes
the
up.
key is, you're right. I mean, it's good for business, but it comes at a cost, right? So with great trust comes great responsibility. And if you're not willing to invest in what is going to be required to protect that information you are being trusted with from the federal government, you shouldn't be doing it. That has to be an intentional conversation, an intentional decision for your company.
We need to build solutions that are safe.
That's right.
And safety runs the whole gambit of the quality, and we just talked about one of which is cyber. But they need to be safe. We need to have quality in the products that
That's right.
we deliver. And I think ultimately that's where the differentiation comes in. I mean, they wins because they're compliant. I beat my competitor because I was compliant. Well, they're compliant too.
Right.
You win because you differentiate.
That's right.
On your product or your capability. Sometimes it's in price, sometimes it's in performance, but it's outcome driven. These compliance things must get done.
That's right.
But it's not the competitive advantage.
That's right.
It
Well,
can
not
be in the
yet.
small business today, though.
Yeah.
Well, and unless you're in the cyber business. I mean, if you're in a cyber business, you're developing cyber solutions for your customers, then you're certainly going to differentiate on your ability to address the cyber output.
There are just some vehicles in the small business market that are very point-based, and if you don't have them, you just don't score the points to be able to get on the
Yeah.
vehicles. So larges typically can check everything,
Yes.
but we have to actually, it's difficult.
So can I ask a question?
You
Just because it's you,
absolutely.
Stacy, only you right now can break the rules. Still recorded.
So it's a national security issue, right? I mean, we are trying to become cyber secure to protect our way of life, protect our capabilities. What do you think needs to happen in the United States for people to start taking cyber more seriously, right? Because I think, we've heard the term rising tide raises all boats, right? So if everybody complies with cybersecurity, then you'll still be competitive because everybody's gonna have to absorb those overhead and tuning costs to be able to get there. But, imagine if we were all driving self-driving cars and we hacked into the GPS system like a 40 and we got stuck in 5 hours of gridlock. Would that be enough to piss people off to make them say, we need to get cyber secured? I feel like we're on the verge
No.
of one trauma, one issue that's cyber related that's gonna give us
Yeah.
basically cyber.
My very short answer, and I'd love to hear the panel, my very short answer is we have to get the incentives right. The incentives are not right now. It is sticks, 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 no carrots. So we have to start focusing on the carrots to help, and I will tell you, just to get through FedRAMP, millions of dollars of investment. And I'm a mid-sized company, we've made that investment, we've made that decision. That is poverty line, right there. There is not many companies in here probably would be willing to do that. Did you know it takes millions of dollars? I'm talking to you as a government person, right, representing all government people. Did you know it? Yeah, it costs millions of dollars to get my system accredited to FedRAMP Moderate. You wanted it there. You actually gave me that requirement. Do you remember? Did you know it cost me millions of dollars? Did you know that I was, going to have to make that investment just to be compliant with you? So that's just an example, but I think sticks, right? Whether that's funding, making it an allowable cost, tax incentives, so many. I could have a whole conversation on incentives, but there are too many sticks and not enough carrots. That's my short answer. 5-minute warning. Got it. Thank you, ma'am.
1,000%.
Yes.
1,000%. It's about the incentives and motivating people and helping them understand why they need to do it. How many people remember Smokey Bear? Only you can prevent forest fires. That was a social marketing campaign that enabled people to feel like they could make a difference. We're not doing that. We're telling people, here's these things you have to do because I said so. Eat your vegetables because I said so. We're not explaining that the vegetables are full of nutrients and things that are good for your body and reasons why they're going to be effective for you. Another thing that is a possible incentive that's coming is there are some forward-thinking insurance companies that are looking at the dip and seeing that, well, they've got these cybersecurity requirements. Let's incentivize them to go forward and make sure that they do a really effective job of this. And one thing that CEOs understand in terms of risk is insurance is a good thing. So that's another way you can get your foot in the door with your CEO and the people who make the decisions on risk, is to say, if we want good cyber insurance around this, then we need to be compliant with these, and I need these resources to make this happen.
Yep.
There's a joke that the cybersecurity poverty line is the line you stand in after you get FedRAMP.
Yeah.
You can't eat anymore. Yeah, exactly.
Food stamps.
I'm gonna sound super pessimistic when I say this, but the adage that regulation's written in blood, in short, there hasn't been enough blood. I mean, we would expect to see companies and C-suites and executives really start to care about this stuff, and we do start to see it, especially from the primes and the DIB. I'm getting in just the last couple of years way more seriousness from the primes and how they're dealing with their supply chain. But I'm telling you, every week I talk to a small business owner, a small business leader, and these aren't all micro businesses. These are 100, 200, 500 person companies that don't understand it, don't really care, because to them, it hasn't happened yet.
Yep.
They have not been hit yet. They look at their peers, they say, those guys 5 years ago implemented 171, nothing happened to them.
But I think to Stacy's point, if you wait for it to happen to all of us,
yeah, no,
it's game over.
That-
Adversary
that's
wins.
what's gonna
It's
happen.
not a
China
good-
wins.
That's what's required. We see in the news all the time ransomware and individual companies getting attacked. That affects that company and nobody else.
Yeah.
The large
Right.
Colonial Pipelines was an inconvenience at best. And a $5 million, it's gonna take something that's gonna be a lot more than an inconvenience to turn
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Blood needs to
Well,
go.
the cyber Armageddon. I mean, I think that, a couple of thoughts. It's a great question. Thanks for leading the witness. I mean, I would say that a part of the problem that we're facing is we see like we're still too focused on compliance. And as an engineer and a CTO, I mean, I don't want to spend another dollar on compliance. I mean, because that dollar could be used for innovation. It can be used for building, capability and competitive differentiation. I mean, so I don't want to spend another dollar here. I want to spend it on the other side of the equation. But this is about managing the risk. I mean, my kids have a very different risk profile in their online experience than I do. You know, all of us make personal risk decisions. And so I think when the effects of cyber negative outcomes get to a place where it's making us rethink
Yeah.
the risk for ourselves beyond compliance, that's when I think
Yeah.
we'll start looking at this differently. I mean, you know, analogy is, you know, for breakfast, we always say that the chicken is, you know, compliant, but the pig is committed. You know, and so what I really want is for you to get away from just, yeah, I gotta meet the minimum kind of thing without thinking about it anymore, but really take this more personally. Because what I do, the outcome I generate, the contribution I make is gonna make,
Yeah.
that's gonna make the difference.